This is day 5 of 30 days AWS series, and in this video we will learn about AWS VPC or Virtual Private Cloud and some of the other networking components inside the VPC. So before we learn about Virtual Private Cloud, it is important to understand region and availability zones. So AWS region is a geographic area like Mumbai, London, Tokyo, and inside those regions there are availability zones. So each availability zone has one or more data center inside it. So for example, inside Mumbai region, there are three availability zones: AP South 1A, AP South 1B, and AP South 1C. So when we create resources on AWS Cloud, we get to choose the region and availability zone in which we want to keep our resources. And we can choose if we want to keep our resources in one zone or multiple zones. Now let's assume there are two people using AWS Cloud, and inside that they are using different services and their networking setup is also different. So now how AWS will make sure that their network will not conflict with each other and their resources will be secure inside their AWS Cloud. So that's where VPC comes in. So VPC is an isolated virtual network inside AWS Cloud. So we can think of it like a private land inside a city where we can allow who can comes in and who can goes out. So in VPC we can allow which traffic can comes in and which can goes out and how traffic flows inside the VPC. And you can see in the diagram a VPC cover all the availability zones inside one region. So when we create a VPC, we just create one VPC per region and it covers all the availability zone inside it. And inside VPC, we can define number of IP addresses that we need for our network using CIDR notations. Now there are some other networking components inside the VPC. So the first component is subnet. So subnets are subdivision of VPC. So for example, if a VPC has 256 IP addresses, so we can divide into two subnets. Each subnet can have 128 IP addresses. And by default, we can create 200 subnets per VPC. And unlike VPC, subnet doesn't cover all the availability zone inside one region. If we want to keep our resources in multiple zones, we have to create subnets in each of the availability zones. So a subnet can cover only single availability zone. And we can configure two types of subnet, public subnet and private subnet. So the public subnet is the subnet which has direct access to the internet. And when we create public subnet, we keep resources which we want to expose to the internet, like web server. And private subnet is the one which doesn't have direct access to the internet. So inside private subnet, we can keep resources which are confidential, like our database. And to allow public subnet to have internet access, we use internet gateway. And if our resources in private subnet need internet access for software updates or security patches, we can use NAT gateways. So NAT gateways allow private subnet resources to have internet access, but it doesn't expose private resources to the internet. Also, it doesn't allow outside traffic to come to the private subnet. So just remember, for public subnet, we use internet gateways, and for private subnet, we use NAT gateway. And all of this traffic from public subnet to internet and then private subnet to NAT gateways is controlled by route table. So route table acts like a traffic controller inside a VPC. So in diagram you can see there are two route tables. One is connected with public subnet and another one is connected with private subnet. So each route table has destination IPs and the routes where traffic goes through to reach to the destination. Now let's go to the console and do some hands-on. So I logged into console and let's search VPC. So this is the dashboard for VPC. Let's go to your VPC. And as you can see, there is one VPC already created. So this is the default VPC. So when we create AWS account, we get a default VPC in every region. So you can see currently I'm in Mumbai region, and if I go to Virginia region, here also I have one default VPC. So we get one default VPC in every region. Now, if we select this VPC and go to resource map, we can see there are default subnets which is connected with this VPC and one route table, and there is an internet gateway. So all of these things are default. When we create AWS account, we get this default networking setup. So there are three default subnets, one subnet in each of the availability zone, and all three subnets are connected with one route table and the internet gateway. That means all these three subnets are having internet access. So these are public subnets. So if you remember in last video when we created EC2 instance, we left the networking setting as default. So that EC2 instance was created on this default VPC and subnet. Now let's create custom networking setup. So first we will create a VPC and then two subnets, public subnet and private subnet. So just click on create VPC and give a name. So I'll give demo VPC. And then here we have to give CIDR notation. So CIDR notation is specify how many IP addresses we want to assign to this VPC. If you don't know how to calculate number of IP addresses using CIDR notation, so I have created a video, you can check that out. For this VPC, I'll give CIDR notation with 24 CIDR prefix. Now here you can select if you want IPv6 CIDR block or only IPv4. So for now, just select no IPv CIDR block and click on create VPC. So VPC is created and in resource map you can see this is VPC. There is no subnet because we have not created any subnet on this VPC, but there is a route table. So remember when we create a VPC, a route table gets created automatically. So this is called main route table. So we can either use this route table for routing or we can also create our custom route table. So we have created VPC. Now we will create subnets. So go to subnets, click on create subnets and choose VPC. We will create two subnets. One would be our public subnet and another one would be our private subnet. So for the first subnet, let's call it public subnet. You can give any name. I am giving public subnet to avoid any confusion. And then select availability zone. So I will select AP South 1A and then we have to give the CIDR block. So our VPC has 256 IP addresses. So I will divide 120 IP address to each of the subnets. So for this subnet, I will give IP with 25 CIDR prefix so that it gets 128 IP address. And create second subnet. So let's call it private subnet. Select availability zone. For this one, I will select AP South 1B and then give the CIDR block. Now click on create subnet. So subnets are created. Now we will create an internet gateway and a route table which routes the traffic from public subnet to internet gateway so that public subnet resources can have internet access. So go to internet gateway and click on create internet gateway. Here give a name. I will give my IGW, which is internet gateway, and click on create internet gateway. So right now the state is detached. We have to attach it to VPC. So go to actions and click on attach to VPC and select your VPC and then attach internet gateway. So VPC is attached to this internet gateway. Now to allow public subnet traffic to go through internet gateway, we have to give a route in route table. So let's create a route table. Go to route table and create route table. Give a name. Let me give my route table and then select the VPC and click on create route table. So route table is created and as you can see there is a default route here. So in destination this is the CIDR block for our VPC and target is local. So that means any traffic inside the VPC will flow only within VPC. So this is the default route we get when we create route table. Now let's add a route to internet gateway. Click on edit routes and click on add routes. So our destination would be internet. So give this IP address and target would be our internet gateway. So select internet gateway and then select the internet gateway ID which you have created and click on save changes. So you can see we have added this route. Now we will associate public subnet to this route table. Click on edit subnet association and select the public subnet and save association. So we have associated the public subnet to this route table and Now any traffic comes from the public subnet will go through this route. So it will go through the internet gateway. Now let's launch an EC2 instance inside public subnet. So search for EC2, go to instances and launch instance. Here give a name to your server. Let me call it public server and select the operating system. And instance type would be 33 micro as always. Select the key pair. I will select the previous key pair which I have. If you don't have the key pair, you can create a new key pair. Added the networking setting and select your VPC and select the public subnet. And auto assign public IP should be enabled because resources in public subnet need public IP address. And security group settings, let it be default. Click on launch instance. So instance is launched. Now let's SSH to it. Copy the public IP and go to the terminal. Give SSH-I and your private key file name. And by the way, if you have created new key pair, so you have to first modify the permission to 400 and then you can try SSH. I'm using my previous private key file, so it is already having 400 permission. So I'm not doing that again. Then give the username of your server at the rate. Give the public IP address and hit enter. Give yes. So we have connected with our public server. And to check whether this server has internet access, you can curl with any website. Let's say http://www.google.com. So if we get the response, that means this server has internet access. Yep. So you can see we can successfully curl to google.com. That means this server has internet access. Now let's create an instance on private subnet. Again, go to instance and launch instance. For this instance, I will give name as private server so that you guys can understand that this is the server which is on private subnet. Select the operating system and instance type. Select the key pair. Edit network settings. Select your VPC and now here you have to select private subnet. So it is already there. And always remember we don't assign public IP to our private subnet resources. So auto assign public IP should be disabled here. Now click on launch instance. So instance is created in private subnet. You can notice that there is no public IP address for this one. There is only private IP address. And now let's connect to this instance and see whether we can curl google.com. So copy private IP and go to terminal. Let me clear this. So as we don't assign public IP to our private subnet instance, we cannot SSH directly to instance. First, we have to SSH to our public instance, which is in public subnet, and then from there we can SSH to our private subnet instance. And before that, we have to copy the private key to our public server so that when we SSH to our private server from public server, it can use that private key. To copy the private key file, give the command scp-i and your file name and the username of your public server, the public IP address. So copy the public IP address of public server and give colon and the path where you want to copy this file. So I'll give /home/ubuntu. So now private key is copied to our public instance. So let's SSH to it. SSH-i, give the key file name and let me copy this from here. Paste and hit enter. So we have logged into our public instance and if you ls, you can see the private key file name which we have copied. Now modify the permission here again. So give chmod 400 and your file name. And now we can connect to our private server. So Copy the private IP address of your private instance and give the same command ssh-i, the file name and the username at the rate, paste the private IP. Yeah. Now you can see we have logged into our private subnet instance. And remember that when we connect with our private subnet instance from the public instance, so the public instance is called Bayesian server or a jump server. Now that we have connected to our private instance, let's see if we can curl google.com. So give curl http colon double slash www.google.com. So you can see the curl got failed to connect to google.com because our private subnet doesn't have direct access to internet. So now we have to create a NAT gateway and a route table which route the traffic from private subnet to the NAT gateway. So now we will create a NAT gateway, and always remember we keep NAT gateways in public subnet, and then we will create a route table which routes the traffic from private subnet to this NAT gateway. So on VPC dashboard, you can see there is an option for NAT gateways. Click on that. Click on create NAT gateways. Give a name. Let me give my NAT gateway. And then we have two options here, regional and zonal. So if you want to create this NAT gateway for whole region, you can select regional. And if you just want to create in one availability zone, you can select zonal. So I will select zonal, and then we select the subnet. So as I told, we create this NAT gateway on our public subnet. So I will select the public subnet, and connectivity type should be public. And elastic IP allocation, just click on allocate elastic IP and click on create NAT gateway. So NAT gateway is created and right now it is in pending state. So now the state is available. So we have created the NAT gateway on public subnet. Now we will create a route table and give a route from private subnet to NAT gateway. So go to route table and click on create route table and give a name. For this one, let me give private route table because it is for private subnet, that's why. Otherwise you can give any name and select the VPC and create route table. Now we will add a route to our NAT gateways. Add route, select the IP and the NAT gateway, and then select the NAT gateway which we have created and save the changes. And then go to subnet association. For this route table, we will associate the private subnet. So select the private subnet and save the association. So we have associated the private subnet and given the route to NAT gateway. So any traffic from private subnet will go through the NAT gateway. Now let's go back to terminal. Let me log into private instance again because I got logged out. So we have connected with our private instance. Now let me curl google.com again. So we can see now we can curl google.com from our private instance. So this is the difference between when we create resources in our public subnet and private subnet. Private subnet instances use NAT gateway to have the internet access. So their IP don't expose to the internet, and they can access the internet, but no incoming traffic can come to private resources. So for security purpose, AWS recommend us to keep all our resources in private subnet and keep a jump server on public subnet so that we can access our private server from it. So this is all for this video. You guys keep practicing and make sure once you are done with your hands-on, just terminate all the EC2 instances and NAT gateways, internet gateways and route table which you have created, except the default ones. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and I'll see you in the next video.